Hello, everybody. Kim here with another episode of Masks Off. Last time I was with you, I spoke about perfectionism and carrying around that 20-ton shield. And I want to continue the conversation about perfectionism. And I think that, we as a society do not talk about the implications of this as much as we should. It just seems like, these perfectionistic patterns and tendencies are just a part of who we are. And it seems like it's just normal and it's natural. And it's a given that if we wear this mask, that it's the way we are, it's the way we always were, and it's how we show up. So we don't really stop, pause, and question whether these patterns or tendencies are even healthy for us. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but I'm going to begin with a quote as I normally do. And this one is a very short and simple quote, and one that is used over and over and over again. And it's so profound. So the quote is very simply put, "To thy own self be true." So the reason why I chose this quote is because we can be so conditioned by society to be a certain way and to think a certain way. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that we can be so conditioned to look on the outside for approval and validation rather than going by like the beat of our own drum. Our internal compass knows what's best for us, what decisions to make, what directions to go in, how we want to live our lives. And we often, most of the time, really, if we're really being honest here, most of the time we are aborting our internal compass. So to share a little bit about how this shows up for me or has shown up for me is that in the past, whenever I have tried to venture out on doing something new, creating something new, that I would either consciously or subconsciously be listening to all of these external outside voices. And then we can probably take this way, not probably, we can take this all the way back to when I was little, of hearing outside voices, caregivers, peers, teachers, society, television back then, social media now, telling us how we're supposed to be. We are looking outward for that validation. We're looking outward to know that we're okay. So most of that messaging, or a lot of that messaging, is telling us that we have to do. And in order to be valuable or quote unquote successful, we have to be producing and performing and producing, again, these outcomes, measurable outcomes. Even when you work, with companies or coaches and business, they're like, what are your SMART goals? What are the things that you can measure? Okay, let me pause here for a second. Yes, of course, there are certain times and conditions when we do need to produce a certain outcome. If you're going to become a doctor, it's really important that you can perform and achieve and do certain surgeries, and you know how to operate You certainly don't want to go into an operation not being able to accomplish and achieve certain things. And there are many jobs out there and careers out there where things need to be measured. Okay, so put that aside. We're not talking about those. Now, going back to, but what we do is we're so conditioned that everything is being measured, everything is being evaluated. And when society puts these external pressures on us, we start to create that inner voice, that inner dialogue, and we create this internal pressure. So, and if we're not like talking about having to put food on the table, I'm not talking about that. We do have certain survival needs that need to be met, and we have to be able to make money, and we have to have a roof over our head and put food on the table and be able to clothe ourselves and kids if we have them. Like, I'm not talking about that. That's a given. What I'm talking about is the rest of our lives where we put this internal pressure and we lose sight. We lose total sight and connection to our internal compass, our inner knowing. Thus, the quote, "To thy own self be true." And what can happen is as we lose sight of that internal knowing and pressure, and we're just listening to what we think should be done, what we think people are expecting of us, that if we're not meeting those expectations, then what can happen is a sense that can set in is this sense of not enough. I'm not doing enough. And if I'm not doing enough, if I'm failing, then maybe I should just give up. Maybe I should just quit. And this has definitely been a pattern for me in the past. Whenever I have tried to set out on something new, if I couldn't do it being whatever the venture was, if I couldn't do it perfectly all at once, like yesterday, and I keep bringing this point up because this is such an underpinning for someone who struggles with perfectionism. And I really, really want people to understand the nuances and the layers of perfectionism. It's not just about like your house has to look really perfect, or your outfit has to look perfect, and your makeup has to be perfect, and your, body shape has to be perfect, or your yard or your lawn has to be perfect. Like, that's part of it, but there's so many more layers and nuances to perfectionism. So I really want to keep honing in and repeating some of these major points, that if you have this tendency that you have to, when you're learning something new and doing it for the first effing time, FFTs, that you have to get it done. Like, you have to know how to do everything perfectly all at once, right away from the beginning. No mistakes, no learning curve, no trial and error. That's a perfectionistic thinking. And it's because the mindset, the inner dialogue is saying that if I can't do this perfectly all at once, and people are watching, and people are judging or criticizing or telling me that I should be someplace else at a different point in time or further along than I am, then somehow it sets in that I'm not enough. I'm failing in some way. I'm falling short in some way. And this kind of thinking, this pattern, the mask, the pattern has kept me from stepping outside my comfort zone. It kept me playing small because I would just try something, and if I couldn't do it perfectly right away, I would quit. And I can honestly say that there are even times now, as I'm building this business, because there are so many things, so many moving parts going on right now to get this built and off the ground, that it does at times feel like overwhelm. And I'm hearing voices in my head, not like schizophrenic voices. The inner dialogue, the tapes, the people's expectations. If you're not making X amount of dollars, then you're not successful. If you're not doing this and this and this, like measurable outcomes, then you're not being successful. And if I'm not mindful, I can get caught up in those external pressures. And then they start creating an internal pressure on myself, whereas I have to take a step back. So here is what I know, and here's what I've learned. And here's what I want to share with you. Is the antidote, the way to alchemize perfectionism and this pattern is, one, to thy own self be true. And it takes a practice to tune out the noise of other people and to just come back to that internal compass of what you know. And when you can come from a place of you are worthy, you are enough, you are abundant just as you are. You don't need any achievements or measurable goals to define and distinguish who you are. You are divine just the way you are because you were born into this world. And we are not taught and conditioned to know and believe that that is enough. We are conditioned to believe the opposite, that unless we're achieving blah, 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 we are not enough. If we're falling short, we're not enough. That's the way most of us were raised. That's the way most of us were conditioned. So coming back to the antidote is to be able to change your inner dialogue so that you are telling yourself that your best is good enough. And if you're trying something new, it could be a new relationship, it could be a new job, it could be a new hobby, it could be you are building a business, it could be any number of things that you are trying to do for the first time. And then if you change your inner dialogue to baby steps, one step at a time, my best is good enough. And when, not if you fail and make mistakes, but when you make a mistake or you fall short in some way, shape, or form, or some days you just like, I don't have it in me today to do this. Don't have it in me to, maybe it's your job. And you know what? Maybe sometimes you do need to take a personal day or I don't know what they call it, but like an R&R day. So a mental health day. So I think that's what they're calling it. Like sometimes maybe that is just what you need to do and let yourself just be, because we all get caught in this freaking rat race of just go, 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 do. Like we're all racing through life to go freaking where? Where are we going? We're racing to our grave. Like, really, is that how you really want to be living your life? And not only am I saying that to all of you, but I'm saying it to myself too, because I am guilty of getting caught up at times I'm on this hamster wheel and I'm racing like crazy. I got my list and I'm getting shit done all the time. And it's like, oh, great. For what? For what? So that on my deathbed, I could say, oh, look at all the things that I got done and accomplished. So going back to the antidote, and I'll take a breath right now because breathing is really important as well. Meditation, being mindful, changing your inner dialogue, reminding yourself of these different mantras. I will repeat some of them. Baby steps, one step at a time. Easy does it. Your best is good enough. and then allowing for self-compassion, allowing for grace. Now, if you struggle to have compassion and grace for yourself because this is a new practice, I understand. I could not do it for the longest time. I was so stuck in a pattern of beating myself up over and over and over again. And that's why I've created my 5-step power program, because I've learned how to take myself through this process that helps me it's helped me to cultivate and create a practice where I can now have compassion for myself. I can have grace. I can integrate the parts of myself that I have cut off, the parts of myself that I didn't want to include or even acknowledge were there because they were quote unquote less than perfect. So again, another characteristic or symptom of being the perfectionist is not being able to include, recognize, acknowledge, be aware of the imperfections. Just, hey, I can't look at my imperfections. I have to be a perfectionist because that's how I protected myself. That's how I protected myself when I was little. I created, unconsciously, of course, created this perfection mask. This was a way for me to show up in the world to what I thought was be validated. And on some level it did. When I was in school and I was in sports and getting good grades, it did give me the validation that I wanted, but not the real validation. It was a hole for sure. It was a hole that I had inside of me. And so what we are all longing for at the end of the day is for our souls want to come into wholeness. And that's the practice. That's the practice that I teach. That's the practice that I go through with the power program, is to come back to wholeness so that I'm not walking around like Swiss cheese with all of these holes. I'm filling them up so I can be like American cheese or a provolone cheese. And so I know it's a crazy analogy I'm using, but it works if you think about it. Swiss cheese has a lot of holes. And if I fill them in, then I'm coming from wholeness. And that's a whole different way to show up in the world. And when I am, and you can have the same, when you come from a place of wholeness and you fill your holes by healing those blockages that are coming up from all of your patterns from way back, you have the opportunity to come into wholeness. And what's available and what's possible is feeling more energy, feeling more creative, more alive, more joy, more love. You're not coming from this place of need. You're not coming from this place of gimme, 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 because you're finding out how to fill your cup from within. And it's honestly so much healthier and so much, like, I don't know, more alive, it's such a great way. It's so good. I can't even find the words to describe how living this way versus the way that I was living is so much different. Now, it doesn't mean that every single day is perfect, and it doesn't mean that I don't have pain. It doesn't mean that I don't have, things going on or conflict with others. All of that is happening. What is different that got me from point A to point B is that I've learned tools, skills, processes, ways of healing and getting myself across the bridge. As Tara Brach says all the time, to go from longing to belonging. And that's what I have learned to do. And that's what I've created in my power program. And that's made all the difference in the world. There's so much less suffering. for me as a result. So, and I just love being able to show up here, either by myself or when I have guests on to talk about this. I could talk about this all day long, every day, because I so love it. I'm so passionate about it. I enjoy talking about it. Every time I talk about it, I grow. Every time doing this recording right now, I can feel that I'm growing because I'm solidifying what is going on for me. I'm solidifying the process as I share it with you. So I truly hope that this episode was impactful, insightful, inspiring, helpful for even if one of you said, aha, that made sense, then I'm grateful. I'm grateful I was able to just share and help one person get one little thing out of this. And if you did, I would love to hear from you. You can always reach out via email. All my contact information is in the show notes. You can, even if you're watching on YouTube, you can give me a comment. And even if you're listening on Spotify or Apple or any other platform, I would love a review. And that will just help my content to get out there more so. I don't know if it's more quickly. I have no idea how algorithms work, but I think the more that I get reviews and people engaging with my content, the more it'll get out there. And that's the key, that people can benefit from what I'm sharing. So I appreciate all the support for all of you who do listen. Thank you so much for showing up and listening to me and giving me some of your very, very valuable time. So until next time on Masks Off, have a great week, everybody.